running ultras and going out and doing these adventures on your own? It's now this exciting adventure that you feel competent and comfortable taking on.
There's a newfound level of confidence, like, hey, I can be in these uncomfortable situations and navigate and figure them out. There was a part of me that knew I could, but I didn't like the uncomfortableness and the unknown of it going into it.
You can fall asleep really, really fast just by laying down on a trail and closing your eyes.
It was the weirdest sensation to go from like absolutely bleak to wide awake in 5 minutes.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Good People, episode 32. Today, I was joined for the second time by my good friend, Kat Edwards. She is an ultramarathoner and a fitness and nutrition coach. In today's episode, we talked about her most recent adventures running the 100-mile Kodiak Ultramarathon, as well as participating 3 weeks later in the 50-mile Mountain Masochist trail run. Our conversation revolved around what each one of those races meant to her, her durability in running long distances, and all that she hopes to accomplish in the sport in the future. Before we begin, if you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Enjoy the show. Yeah, well, Kat, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be back once again.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of second go-arounds with previous guests, and you are in the list of one of the first people that has come back on, which is pretty cool.
Truly honored. Truly honored.
I'm actually, do you remember my episode with Jenny Rozier? We did attachment theory stuff.
Yes. She's
coming back on next week, and we're talking about young people's online dating habits, and I'm really excited for that.
Oh, that one will be awesome. That is actually something I would like to know more about, because I feel like it's a chaotic world that I don't understand.
Yeah, and I don't think most people who are young understand it either, and they still partake in it.
That's fair. That is truly fair. I'm excited for that one. I'll be listening.
I'm excited to have that conversation. But anyways, what have you been doing since we last had the opportunity to chop it up?
Yeah, I have been running, and I've done a little bit more running and I've done some work and a little bit more running. And that's pretty much what I have been doing since I last chatted after my 100.
And I think something that was cool coming away from that was all of the races and things and ideas you had planned for your ultra running career coming forward. And you've since, checked some pretty cool boxes off of that. You've done your second 100 miler, and you had a quick turnaround to another 50-mile race, which is a really cool feat in and of itself. But let's start there. What were the races that you just finished recently?
Yeah, this October 13th, I did the Kodiak 100 miler by UTMB. That one was out in Big Bear Lake, California. It was so beautiful. And then this past weekend, so November 4th, was the Massanutten Mountain Trail 50 miler. And that was also just an incredible community event. So that's what I have done this fall. And it was actually a complete pivot from what I thought I would be doing when I last chatted with you. But I'm honestly really, really grateful that it turned out the way that it did, because it was an awesome month here in the trail running side.
Yeah. What were you originally going to do? I understand you had some pretty big travel plans for some of these things.
Yeah. So the original plan as of last December was to do the Wildstrupel 110 kilometer race out in Switzerland, and that would have been in September. And they would have been in the same month that Jason, my boyfriend, would be racing in Spain for his 500-mile gravel race. And through logistics and work approval time off, we thought we could swing it, but his work wouldn't let him take that full month. And so I did not want to go to Switzerland by myself. The logistics weren't coming together for it, and it just kind of seems like a closed door there. So I worked with my coach to pivot. I'd spent the year training for a high altitude and big mountain event. So I was like, okay, let's find something that can kind of fill that training specificity that we've been working on. And he found the race, which was also by UTMB, out in California. And it was still an awesome trip, an awesome event. And honestly, with what I took away and what I learned from just that whole logistical experience, I'm really grateful that I didn't go to Switzerland this year and I got to instead learn the travel side of the sport stateside before going international for next year.
Very cool. Something you mentioned there that I've become curious about is working with a coach. That's relatively recently new for you, correct?
I started working with a coach like a year and a half ago, and I through a company called Chosky Endurance, and then I switched coaches. I now work with the one of the founders and head coaches of Chosky, and I started working with him at the beginning of the spring. So he's a new addition and has been really, really awesome to work with and working with their company. So I've been working with someone for a little while now, but I would say the seriousness of who I'm working with and how has increased this year.
I am somebody I've always done, obviously, you know this, ultra marathons just for fun. I have no intention to do or run well. Usually, you know, sometimes you get a little excited when you're out there, but I just have a passion for this stuff. So I want to train and do this stuff and learn for myself and from my own mistakes. Obviously, there's tons of benefits from working with a coach, but I know as somebody who is a coach yourself, what have you found beneficial for working with somebody specifically?
Yeah. As a coach myself, I still feel like there's so much that I don't know, and each coach brings their own experiences and bank of knowledge with them. And so I don't know what my own blind spots are. I also, because I coach full time, I don't want to program for myself and go through the decision fatigue of like, oh, what should I do? And so many of these races I'm embarking on are unfamiliar territory. So I'd love to work with somebody who has experienced these things, has experienced these on a high level, a competitive level, and then can then insert their own expertise into the blind spots that I carry. So working with him has been super, super helpful in that, specifically because he specializes in high altitude mountain racing. And that is something that is so incredibly foreign to me. So getting his long training history background and personal experiences in the sport and the expertise that he carries in areas that are completely foreign to me. So I think that it's awesome for coaches to have coaches, and I like getting to work with somebody, collaborate with someone. There's always going to be workouts that I wouldn't program for myself that make me better. So getting those on my program is like, yeah, dang, that's going to be a hard one. But here we go. And getting the feedback and the relationship part of that coaching relationship has been really, really helpful for me this year.
Yeah, cool. I've heard that perspective from a lot of people who are coaches who get programming or are trained by others. And it's that it just simplifies it for them. It's good to get exposure to other ideas and methodologies and explore in that way. It's funny. I don't really have experience actually other than jujitsu being coached by other people, but for some reason people always ask me, because I'll do my gym's general CrossFit programming, and they're like, man, what were you thinking when you wrote this? And I don't know if this is necessarily a skill or whatever, but when I'm writing and constructing a workout, I literally have no thought like, oh, I'm going to have to do this. It's just like, what is effective? And then I write it. And sometimes it doesn't even occur to me when I'm doing the workout, like, oh, I programmed this. This was on me. Like, I don't know. Maybe that is a skill, but I separate those two things. Writing a workout and program is different than actually going through it.
I think that is a good skill, because if you're too emotionally attached to what you're writing in terms of either I'm going to do this or how am I going to experience this, you're not writing it for yourself. You're writing it for a group of other people. So I think that's actually a really good way to approach programming. Then you're also looking at it from the scientific and the effectiveness of it, and not like your personal experience from it, if that makes sense. So I like that. I think that's a great way to program, actually.
Yeah. And I also think I view workout programs as a very loose blueprint in general. It's like, this is what you kind of should be doing. And a lot of it really comes down to a given day, the way that you execute something. And so I bet that probably has something to do with it as well.
Yeah, I would agree. But I like that. I like that headspace.
Tell me about each one. I know if you and I have talked about this. There's always this consistent theme that you will take away from each race you do. At least that's what's happened to me. I know in talking to you, that's sort of what happens to you as well. What was the thing that you learned or took away from your Kodiak 100 a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I would say there was a huge theme in building confidence outside of my comfort zone. So for Kodiak, that one, because it was a little bit of a last minute race, the normal people and I would love to have around me weren't able to go. So Jason, you being my typical pacer through the last part of my races, the person that knows me the best, he wasn't able to go. I know I talked to you about going, but you couldn't go. So I was like, shoot, who am I going to have around me for this event? And I ended up being able to pull my sister and a mutual friend in. But something that was really uncomfortable for me was actually the solo travel out there. I've never been to the West Coast. I've never left the East Coast time zone. So solo travel was definitely new. And there was a lot of elements to that were outside of my comfort zone. And then the race itself being my first time ever experiencing altitude, ever going into that climate and that area. And so I feel like there was a huge amount of worry and anxiety for me around the unknown and the uncomfortable aspects to things that I didn't know how to navigate on my own. And the people that I thought I could lean on to navigate those things for me wouldn't be there. But that honestly turned out to be the best part of that entire experience, because I've been able to walk away with a whole newfound confidence of like, first of all, I can drive a Sprinter van around LA traffic, and you never know when you're going to need to do that. But I feel comfortable and more confident traveling to races by myself, which is going to have to be a big thing moving forward and where I want to go in my career. And then within the race itself, navigating the uncomfortable parts of not knowing how I was going to feel, what I was going to be able to do, especially going up to 10,000 feet, what the terrain would be like, what the exposure would be like, what the air would feel like. It was just a huge question mark. Like I knew what running 100 miles felt like, but I felt like I couldn't depend on any of that really to get through this particular event.
That's really interesting. And I think something that's cool from that is just like the freedom you gain from feeling like you have autonomy in certain ways. I remember the first time I ever stayed up at my cabin my family has had by myself. I think I did it when I finished my freshman year of college. I stayed the night at my cabin because it was on the way back home to my parents' house. And I remember sitting there at night, like it was I think it was wintertime actually. So it might've been after my first semester. You know, the doors are shut up, the fire's going. I'm in the middle of the woods by myself, obviously like in a house, but I remember being like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've ever been this alone. There's no cell service. I'm by myself. And I remember waking up in the morning. I wasn't really fearful, but you know, there's a little bit of like nervousness to something like that. And I remember as soon as I woke up in the morning, I kind of had this calm, like, oh, you did it, man. Like, good job. And so now the thought of doing something like that is obviously exciting and fun for me. And it almost seems like running ultras and going out and doing these adventures on your own is not this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? It's now this exciting adventure that you feel competent and comfortable taking on.
100%. There was even a point in the build up to this that was like, honestly, once I start the race, this is going to be the easy part, because figuring out all of these logistics with travel and housing and rental cars and traveling from wherever to get where I needed to go and navigating all those things by myself. Like I had never even taken an Uber before until this trip. And so I was like, I don't know how to get an Uber. So I had to figure all those things out. So I was like, once I can get through the race buildup, I can put one foot in front of the other for a while, but all this other stuff, I have no idea how it's going to go. So there's a newfound level of confidence. Like, hey, I can be in these uncomfortable situations and navigate and figure them out. And there was a part of me that knew I could, but I didn't like the uncomfortableness and the unknown of it going into it.
You're probably the only person that's ever going to say, I'd rather run 100 miles than order an Uber.
Yeah, that's probably true. But it turns out riding an Uber isn't that bad. But the anxiety of not knowing how to navigate it I was like, yeah, I'd rather run 100 miles than get an Uber right now.
Yeah, I understand. Your 50 miler, I can't remember what you said. Was it the Masochist or was it Mountain Masochist or was it the Massanutten Mountain?
Mountain Masochist. I might have said it wrong in the first, and I can't remember. But it was the MMTR, the Mountain Masochist Trail Run.
Good deal. What was that for you? I understand, 50 miles for you it's a weekend run, but what did you leave that race feeling and thinking?
I was left feeling so proud and so full. I had been wanting to do that race since like August, but I never signed up for it because I wanted to make sure that I was feeling good and prepared for it coming out of my 100, because you just never know what's going to happen in those events. So my coach and I worked together to kind of assess how my recovery was going, how my energy was doing, how I felt before making the final registration. And so once I got there, I'm going to be honest, the first 2 hours of the race and then spending the night in the back of a Subaru camping, I didn't really want to be there. But by the end of the day, I left feeling so proud of what I mentally and physically accomplished, but even more fulfilled from the community at that event. It was probably the most wholesome and grassroots oriented ultra event I have been to. And getting to have amazing conversations with people on the trail, having amazing interactions with aid station workers and volunteers, and then getting to just engage with the community at the finish line. I think that was the biggest takeaway of this is the real ultra experience and the real ultra community that is just so dang awesome that I walked away fulfilled and grateful from the season, but also ready to rest, ready to take some downtime now.
Yeah, the Masochist was my first ever ultra. It's a different course. It was a different course for you than it was for me, but I remember this. It was probably my favorite one I've done. And actually, a lot of the ultras that I've done thus far were put on by the same people, so they've all been great experiences. Like Grindstone, the 50Ks that happen at the beginning of every year around this area, like Holiday Lake, Promised Land, and then there's another one. But anyways. Terrapin, they're all super, super awesome events. And I think that they exemplify those community aspects that you were talking about. Everybody out there is the best and so supportive, and it's a good environment to be a part of. It definitely makes running 50 miles through the mountains a little bit easier.
Yeah. I was like, wait, I can finish before dark? And I told myself in my head that it was 100K. And so whenever I finished at 50 miles, it would have felt like 10 miles shorter, and it helped.
Yeah.
The little mind games.
I mean, your experience, it lends itself to, like you find hard what you find hard. It's all subjective, right? And so you've run 100 miles a couple times. You've run through the night. You've done a couple 100Ks, or at least one, right? And for sure, running 50 miles is never easy, but it makes it a lot easier when you've done a lot farther, right? You've literally done twice that distance twice. So
yeah. And I was like picturing Kodiak in my mind and picturing the mile 54 aid station where I met my crew and I only saw them twice in the first 50 miles. And so I was like, I just have to get to Jill and Cole. That's all I have to do today. It'll be a breeze.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I was going to talk about this at the end. In a couple weeks, you, a couple of other of our friends are running this 6-hour event in a local town where it's a 1.3 mile loop and you just run it as many times as you can. I share this because I literally have not run. I mean, I've run a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but very little since my 100-miler last year. It was over a year ago. I'm so underprepared for this. I haven't really trained. I'm going to get a couple of runs in. I've been weightlifting, and it's because I've done the 100-miler. I'm like, for sure, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to be this big lumbering oaf, just like shuffling my feet out there. But, I'll be fine. It's a lot simpler and easier than stuff that I've done. I just have something easier to compare it to.
Yes, 6 hours of running doesn't really feel that much when you've run for over 30 hours. It's like fractional. It'll be fine. We can just walk
Yeah.
if we need to. And I told Jason, I told you all this, but this is going to be a fun run. We are not racing here. We're on rest mode for sure.
Yeah. I was talking to, I don't know if Jason told you Sam's going to be out there. And
Yeah.
I was talking to him and I was like, just so you know, man, like they're telling me that it's going to be fun, but you guys are going to start and you're going to become competitive. And then you're going to be like, I'm going to see how far I can go.
I don't know if you're entirely wrong. That's possible. I hope that's not the case. But I know myself and I know Jason, and there's a little bit of competition there.
I've set the bar extremely low for myself. I'm hoping that I accomplish 20 miles, which, is, you know, for any non-runner, that's a very, I don't know what the exact mileage is. I think it works out to be like 15 or 16 minutes per mile for me to do that. But I am, that's my bar.
I think that's a great bar, and we will help you excel above it. Set a new bar,
Thank
slowly
you.
but surely. Yes.
I understand too that these races were very recent, or very close together. It was a 3 week apart from your 100 miler to
Hmm.
your 50 miler.
Yes.
Okay. How much did that have an effect on how you felt and what the 50 mile experience was like?
Um, if you would have told me that I ran 100 miles before I did that event, I wouldn't have believed you. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I walked away from Kodiak without any muscular soreness, any aches and pains. And the biggest symptom that I had was the week after, just some fatigue in the evenings. Like I could tell that my energy and just my mental and physical fatigue was a little bit higher than usual. But I walked away pretty much unscathed, which is insane. And I've been still kind of sitting with the factors that went into that kind of recovery and that kind of feeling coming off of 100 miles. But I didn't really feel like the race, Kodiak, really played much of a role in my 50 mile at all. I felt really, really strong. I felt really strong climbing. And I felt like I had a really good day where I don't know that I could have made up much more time given where my current fitness abilities are. I obviously see room for improvement in those areas, but I think I tapped myself fully on that course, and walking away being able to say that and feel that, I'm very, very proud of.
And I know the races you've done before, you've kind of left with like that wasn't really as hard as I thought it was going to be. Do you feel differently now that you've done this 50 miler and you feel like you really pushed yourself?
Um, yes, I would say that honestly, the last 15 miles of the 50 miles, I felt way worse than the last 20 miles of my 100 miler. And and I think that's just a little bit with well, essentially my plan with my coach was we didn't have a pacing strategy. We didn't really have a like hard time goal. We were really more working off of effort. And so the goal was to go out to the turnaround at mile 23 somewhat conservatively, just conserve energy there. And on the flip, be able to push a little bit more based on how my body was responding. And that gave me the wiggle room. It's like, okay, in that first 23 miles, if the body's not responding well, if we have an issue going on, that we can race to have a great day in the mountains. But if we're feeling good, we can race the race, if that makes sense. So that last 27 miles, I definitely pushed very, very hard. And so I think it was exactly the experience and level of hard in an ultra that I have been looking for, to the feeling to be able to race it and not just run it for a sense of completion and just giving it my best. Whereas I felt like, okay, I can actually race this. And it gave me feelings of a competitiveness that I had whenever I raced like cross country and track and things like that, of actually getting to jockey with competitors. And it was a really, really, really cool experience.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you're finding that. I think like anything with you just recently completed your first couple hundreds, and so with that, you need to go into it with a little bit of a conservative approach, knowing that it's a distance you've never tackled before and you have to dial things back. But it's cool that you're able to go into the 50 milers, confidence of the distance, and with the goal of, emptying the tank.
It was fun. I haven't gotten to do that at a race before. I've always just tried to pace somewhat conservatively to make sure that I didn't blow myself up too early as I'm learning what my body can handle. And yeah, it was really fun. And I would definitely go do more for sure. The 50 miles is a good distance. It's a nice 1 day race.
Yeah. It's so crazy when you get into the ultra space and you do a couple of them, how that becomes like pretty much 50 miles and below is a fun race for ultra runners because you don't have to run at night or you have
Mhm.
very few hours of darkness right first thing in the morning when you start. I had Greg Sissengrath on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about that in relation to a 50K, where it's like the perfect distance because it's long enough that you're doing an ultra, but it's just a nice Saturday morning. You wake up, you go for a 30-something mile run, pound some beers and a couple pancakes afterwards, and then you show up to work Monday and you feel great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't say I felt great when I showed up to work this Monday. I honestly felt way worse than after my hundreds because I think it was so much harder of a day. But yeah, it's exactly that. There's enough time after the event that you're not finishing in the middle of the night and there's only you and the race director at the finish. Like there's actually a community to engage with and celebrate with. And everybody was out there on course getting to see each other, and it becomes like a little backyard cookout, and it's great. I will be doing more of them for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that you mentioned there with like the evening fatigue post race is a lot of times people who are capable of executing a lot of these distances with relative recency to each other, so like a lot of back to back. You see this with people who do multi-day events as well, like transcon stuff, is
Mhm.
that there's a lot of adrenal fatigue or just in general like nervous system fatigue that you can't really quantify or even feel, but you know it's small signs like that. I wake up sluggish. I'm really tired in the evening. That key you into the, okay, I do need to give myself some rest now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely something that I learned to handle better this time around. And because after my 100 miler this past spring, the Mass Mountain 100, I ran a 15-mile long run the week after, which was stupid because I felt physically fine, but I didn't quite have a handle or enough understanding of what was going on hormonally and with the adrenal fatigue related to taking on an event like that. And so this time around, I did actually take a full week off of running, and I didn't do any like structured workouts or anything hard in between. And I think that really did set up success going into the 50. Is actually paying attention to the signs and symptoms of 100 milers that are under the surface that you can't really see, and don't have necessarily ability to have tangibles on, but can definitely have a big impact on your recovery moving forward.
Yeah. Something that I have thought of since I've watched your ultra journey from afar, is the durability that your body seems to exhibit, which I think is super fascinating. And you are capable of doing distances and recovering from stuff, I think, a lot faster than most people who are at your same training age. Given by the fact that you and I are of similar age, or you're 24.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, we're the same age, and I'm still on my year plus hiatus from my 100 miler, and you have run a 50 miler 3 weeks after. But anyways, I think it's cool that you are you demonstrate that durability, and I'm wondering if that's something that you recognize as well.
Yes, and it's something I put a lot of thought into, and I think there's a lot of pieces that go into it, some of which is my training history and my training age. And then there's also some just like genetic things in terms of my body mechanics, the way that I move. I'm less prone to injuries just with the efficiencies in the way that I move. But a conversation that I actually had with my PT after coming back from a 100 miler is there is a few key domains that are so integral to recovery and to success for athletes. And most athletes are missing at least one of those pieces, being sleep, nutrition, and following a successful training plan, and then having regular, like some sort of like body work or recovery maintenance protocol within their routine to help them move forward. And I would say that I have placed a lot of intentional detail into how much and how often I'm sleeping and what my nutrition looks like, fueling properly for my training and for my races, and having a well thought out training plan from both strength training perspective and from a running perspective, and having an expert coach guiding that. And having all of those pieces together, it is so, so powerful. And I could preach it from the rooftops because it's so integral to what I do as a coach with my athletes, is just really taking that whole person and not just like one tiny detail of that person, but really taking into account like what does your whole life and lifestyle look like, and trying to develop optimization and what you can control within the constraints of your life in those pieces. And in one of your recent podcasts, you said it's everything all at once, all the time. And I feel like that is the perfect description of what I would say that looks like, is it's paying attention to all of the details in the best that you can all of the time. And they all add up to have great results and great performances. And so, yes, I'm super grateful. I don't think it's luck though. And having strength trained since I was in high school and following consistent training programs and sleeping well and eating well, they all matter. And doing them all together really, really matter too.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I've sort of, I haven't really written this down, but I sat down with myself the other day and I went through like this mental checklist of all of the things that I should be doing leading up to this 6-hour thing that we're going to do in a couple weeks. Like, how can I, having not been running and my body's definitely not ready for a high volume run, how can I, mitigate the damage? And all the things you just listed were there. Okay, I just need to make sure I'm eating well. And I have been eating really well the last couple of months. Just continue to do that. Make sure I'm getting enough sleep. Sprinkle in a couple of extra endurance workouts, whatever that may look like. And up until that point, eating well, sleeping well, things like that. And adding some sort of like soft tissue work specifically for me always seems to help stave off the injuries when I run. But do you have any goals for any sort of mega distance, ultra durable body event that, because of all of those things, and you seem to exhibit qualities that would allow you to do something like that? Do you have any goals for stuff like that?
I do. And I'm very, very curious what my body can handle. And so I am entering the lottery to get into Moab 240, which would be a 240-mile race in Moab, Utah, and that would be next fall. So I'm really, really, really hoping I get in. If I don't, I would really like to try to find another 200-mile race for the 2024 season to tackle. And then I also have some goals in terms of international traveling and doing some high altitude training and travels to see and explore a little bit more of that. I loved being at altitude, and I definitely would be curious to explore some new terrains and new environments in that realm.
Do you have any like mega distance transcon goals, like run across the country?
I would love to do a big multi-day FKT or like trail, like a full, like the Colorado Trail. I'd be very interested to do the Appalachian Trail high route. It's like a 360 some mile route that navigates the Appalachian Trail. And there's actually a local woman who was at my race, actually, and she had recently just done the FKT. It took her about 6 days. So those definitely have a big curiosity to me, and I'd love to experience those because I feel like the way that I'm built and the way that I run is very favorable to those longer events. I just feel like I can endure and I'm much stronger longer. And but I want to practice multi-day racing in a race format where there are structured aid stations, and I want to learn more about what that style of training and racing looks like, because from what I have gleaned, you can't race 200 miles like you race 100 miles. And so taking what I've learned in the last less than 2 years of my ultra running and applying it into like a 200-mile duration would allow me to understand a bit more of what that entails, and then use that learning experience to then take on to a solo trail effort. Just because I think the logistics are a lot more difficult when you're going solo and not in an organized race, and being able to plan for that a little bit better. There's a few less fallback plans when there's no aid station volunteers picking you up out of the dirt. So.
Yeah. 240 miles is crazy. And I have run 100, and I know that's crazy. And you've run 100. And like, can you imagine being at the finish line of your 100-miler and not even being close to halfway? Like, you have to run 20 more miles, and then you're halfway, and then you have to go, do that again. That is crazy.
It is crazy. And I literally was thinking about that as I was finishing Kodiak, because very funny story is that my crew was more waxed at the end of it than I was. And so I drove them after finishing to our campsite, and then the next morning woke them up, packed up the van, then drove them back to LA while they slept. And I was like, I could still be running right now. Like, what if? Because my body feels great. I can squat to full depth right now and not wince when I stand up. Could I still be running right now? And it just has sparked this curiosity. And I've looked at a few races and a few race organizers. And I think the destination trail races put on a few 200-milers through the year. And their events look really cool, both from the terrain to the community and the culture involved. So yeah, I would be super excited to experience what that feels like to go past 100 miles and then even past 200 miles. And yeah, it would hurt a lot, but I want to know. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. I have this perspective. The guy that I ran my 100-miler with, when we were doing it, he was like, dude, one day I'm going to do like 200 miles. And I've talked to him recently, and he said something along the lines of like, I'm really thinking about getting it done in the next couple of years. Like, you should do it. And I have not to say that I will never do a distance like that, but I have no desire to do a 200+ mile race. And the reason why is because when I did my 100-miler, I did it because I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I know that I can run 200+ miles. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, and I'm not saying like, oh, just because I know I can means I've done it. Like, it's a insane accomplishment to do that. I just was talking about how crazy it is. But it's not as running 200 miles for me would not be as much of an accomplishment as the first time I did 100 miles. It just like would mean a little bit less, I think, to me.
I can definitely see that in the way that the allure and the unknown of tackling your first 100 miles and experiencing that for the first time. Once you've done that, it almost opens up this can of worms where now anything is possible if I can just keep going. And so you can do 100 miles because you weren't even sure if you could finish that. So if you get to the start line of a 200 miles because you finished 100 miles, you know that you can do it. Is that like the thought process that you're tracking with? Because if so, I kind of understand that mentality a little bit.
Yes, like, to use your words there, people always say this, and it's so cliche, like, just take one more step. But it's true. Like, I was there for 30+ miles during my 100-miler where I was literally telling myself, like, come on, man. Like, literally, I mean, like, you have to, I'm 4 miles from the next aid station. You have to at least get there, and it seriously was at a point where it was like, just one more step. And you can always do that. You can always take one more step. And, obviously you could be pulled from a race or something happens where it's unsafe for you to continue and you should stop. But a very simplified version is you can always keep moving. And I know that for sure because I've been there, and 200+ miles would be no different.
Yeah. And I can't even remember what podcast I was listening to. I listen to so many whenever I run, but there was someone that was speaking on the fact that when they feel, oh, you know what? It was William Googe was on the Rich Gold podcast, and he did the Transcon this year. Funny story. He was actually at Kodiak, and I had no idea. He was running behind me the whole race. They had their whole film crew out there and everything. He dropped at mile 60, but I'm so bummed I didn't get to meet him. Apparently my crew was talking to them.
You didn't get a picture with William Googe?
No, I had no idea he was there. I never saw him at the start line. He was running behind me the whole race. Jill was talking to Robbie Ballinger and the crew and everybody when they were waiting at aids. Failed to tell me until 2 days after I saw him post about it. And I was like, excuse me, what? Anyway.
Dude, I shaved my head a couple weeks ago, and every time I see William Googe on Instagram, I'm like, yeah, it was a good decision. Like, I look
great
this cool.
decision.
I definitely don't
Yes.
look that cool, but
I mean, you could start modeling in France if you wanted to. I think that's what he does when he's not running. But he was talking about whenever he really starts to get into a rough spot, that he asks himself, can I physically take another step? And the answer is always yes. And so he does. And I feel like there's a similar mentality that I have, maybe if it's not the same phrasing, but compartmentalizing things down into smaller bite-sized chunks. And I've gotten down to the point in races where it's like, look, I just took 5 steps. That's 5 steps closer to the finish line, or that's 5 steps closer to the next aid. And then even within that, I will only focus on the section that I am in between the next aid station. So I don't really think about the full race as a whole. And it's this beautiful picture in my mind of just like being wholly present in that small chunk of time and seeing all of those small chunks of time come together to build the full race in its entirety. So I think, the mysterious 200 miles and 200 mile plus multi-day racing, I really want to try my hand at and test myself on both the mental and the physical. Because I feel like there will definitely be some big uncomfies in there. But there's so much to learn that it's just so exciting.
yeah. I'm excited to follow along and see how stuff like that will go. Do you have any, I think the term was Grand Slam for the, what is the first one? Is it Leadville is the first one, or is it Western States?
The 200 miler Grand Slam or the 100 miler Grand Slam?
What's the 100?
There's, it's Hard Rock 100, Western
Rock.
States. It actually falls Western States, Hard Rock, and then UTMB. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I would go for those 3. Would I like to do them all individually? Yes. But it's a very different style of running and racing. Those races have gone to the point where they are very methodical and planned out, much like racing a marathon, where it's very pace oriented and time oriented. And I love the part of ultra running that is the exploration of both self and the external. And I feel like when I'm dialed into caring about paces and times, I lose sight of those things. And that's the original reason why I got burnt out and turned down a college scholarship to run. Is I got tired of caring so much about paces and race results and places. And I think to a certain extent, certain 100 milers have kind of started to become a little bit of that, because the caliber of athletes has gotten so high and they're so fast and so talented that to be competitive in those races, like, you have to be going all in and dialing everything down to the minute on paces and times through sections. So while I would love to experience the atmosphere of those races, I don't think I would target them as my sole purpose for a year, but I am intrigued by the Destination Trails Triple Crown. Actually, that's the name of it. And it's 3 200-mile races in 1 year. Sally McRae did it this year. And following her journey through it was definitely very inspiring and sparked a curiosity for me in what would be possible in multi-day racing and how much I could accomplish in a year, whether it's those 3 or other events or FKTs or anything like that. Down the road, that's definitely something I'd like to tackle.
Yeah, just for anybody listening who's kind of, what are you guys talking about? The races that Kat just went over, the Hard Rock 100, Western States, UTMB, I always describe them as like the Super Bowls of the ultra marathons. Like they're the ones everybody wants to go to, the highly competitive runners. And so, because of that, every race has cutoff times essentially as you go. So like if you don't make aid station X by X time, you get pulled out. So it's not like you just have to keep running until like the 36-hour cutoff or whatever it is for the given race, and then you're done. It's like they'll cut you off along the way on the assumption that you won't be able to make the time. In these specific races, the time caps essentially are extremely, extremely tight just because of the caliber of the runner, as you said. And there's something special about ultras in that for most of them, nobody cares about that stuff. Like, because there's so many variables, you could be the best runner in the world and then you show up and you like ate something weird the night before, and then you have a bad first part to the race, and all of a sudden, you're worried that you're not going to finish the thing, and it could just be like, I need to take a little trail nap and then get back on this thing. And I think that in essence is the beauty of an ultra run, is that no matter what happens, you can save the race if you look hard enough and wait long enough.
Yes. Yeah. If with every high will come a low, and with every low will come a high. And sometimes you just have to be patient enough to let whatever it is pass and problem solve your way out of it. Like there's so many things that you can solve just by taking care of yourself. Like eat something, drink something, have some salt, take a trail nap if you need to, and pretty much the world can change by doing any of those things. As you have well experienced, trail naps are quite magical.
Yeah. Yeah, trail naps are the best. But after you've been running for a couple of days, you can fall asleep really, really fast just by laying down on a trail and closing your eyes.
Yes. Yeah, a 5-minute chair nap turned me from being absolutely broken after summiting 10,000 feet in the middle of the night and down like loose, like chunky rocks for 7 hours, and took a 5-minute nap and was able to hammer for 20 miles. And it was the weirdest sensation to go from like absolutely bleak to wide awake in 5 minutes. Crazy. Highly recommend.
Yeah. Have these recent changes, I know we've talked a bit about your aspirations and curiosities of doing some bigger event stuff, and in that way it's changed your goals a little bit, but have your goals or your desire for certain experiences changed at all after completing these last two events?
I would say the overarching goal has not changed. If anything, it has led to a greater reassurance that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. There was a moment when I was running in Kodiak where it's really hard to explain, but it felt like this great sense of peace and calling was bestowed on me. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. There was this weird, because I was running at altitude, but I felt like my body had been there all along and it knew exactly what to do. And I was just this like floating consciousness that, and my body just like took over. And I was sitting in 3rd to 4th place at that time. And there was several elites in the field. And I had this crazy realization that this big and lofty goal where I've spoken about it, but there's always an element of like, is this actually realistic, or is this too lofty for me to pursue a career in ultra running? And there was this moment where I was sitting and running with the pointy end of a field and having the best time of my life. And I was doing so in a fairly comfortable fashion. And it was this moment where I could like just reach my hand out and almost like touch it and grab it. And it's the closest I've ever been, and also the most reassured I've ever been that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just have this great sense of gratitude and excitement to learn as much as I can and experience as much as I can. And I know this journey will not be easy and there will be lots of ups and downs to it. But in the end, knowing that there is a greater purpose in it, and I don't have to question whether I'm supposed to be here or not. I just know I'm supposed to be here, gives me a sense of peace about it. So the overarching goal of just pursuing a career in ultra running and learning as much as I can, experiencing as much as I can, and hopefully being of positive impact within the community and the running community at large, like that is the goal. But within the micro of like races or events or types of things, I think they will ebb and flow based on elements of curiosity. And I think signing up for races that spark a curiosity, spark a personal connection to or an investment into will ultimately provide a greater result versus just signing up for something for an outcome goal or a performance goal or what have you. So I think like those will kind of ebb and flow, but the greater goal is the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool that you were able to experience that. I'm glad you were able to experience that. And I think that place of contentedness or peace and calm, that's a rare feeling. And I think as you get older, it probably becomes increasingly more rare as you do and achieve greater things. It becomes harder and harder to feel like you are making progress in certain things. And you and I obviously have hopefully a lot of life and career left to live and grow. And so, that feeling is probably in essence what a lot of people are chasing in general. So to hear that you feel like you're on that path is very cool.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very, very grateful. And yeah, it's a crazy place to be, to know that you're where you want to be, especially in your young 20s when most people are just trying to figure out where that is or what that thing is. And to which I would say encourage people to just try as much as they can. And if you feel something sticking, like pursue it, give it everything you have, and you never know. It could just click and all come together. Surprise yourself. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and like if you're not in your early 20s, and we'll probably look back when we're 30s like, man, I had no idea what I was talking about. Like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And I think that that's part of it, right? Is you always look back and you always are like, this is such a silly thing to say, but you go through your life and when you look back, you're like, yes, I needed to go through that. And right, there's a part of that is necessary to feel okay with your current situation, whether it's good or bad, because at any moment you can change your life. You can decide right now that I'm going to start finally pursuing this thing. And say, for example, that your life is completely in shambles and you all of a sudden turn it around and you work tirelessly for years on it. And then you've arrived, you've gotten the thing that you said you've always wanted. When you turn around and you look and you think of like all those decades that you wasted before you started, most people don't have the perspective of like, oh, I wasted my life. They say something along the lines of like, all of those decades I had to go through to finally feel like it was the thing that finally pushed me to start. And we're so lucky that you and I have found that thing before the decades have passed, like it's a lot easier for us to pursue the things that we want because we don't have as many responsibilities, And so I always admire people who are in their 50s and start a business or start a hobby or a passion project that they've always been into after they've had kids and responsibilities and things that have taken them away from it. Because yeah, when you have other stuff going on and very important stuff like a family or whatever, it's so tough to sometimes take the step for yourself because it's more risky and it's scarier.
Yeah, 100%. The risks are definitely greater. But I think it's always a good time to start pursuing whatever it is that is of interest or of curiosity to you. And even if it doesn't click right away or doesn't feel right away, or there's a lot of resistance, what I've learned in my very short time on this planet is every tough season has produced the fruit and the resources that I needed to get through my next tough season or to get to the next step in something. And so while I've gone through arguably a lot of very hard things for someone my age, and have taken on a lot of responsibility for someone my age, it is only because very early on I had to overcome a lot. And each of those things that I overcame, or a job that I held, or an experience that I had, has all like molded to create the skills that I have now. So it's like the decades leading up to that pivotal moment where you make a change or you make an investment or you start a business they're not wasted time. They're all time that you spent being able to build knowledge and tools and resources for yourself that you can then apply into that thing. So whether you're 25 years old or 50 years old or 70 years old, like every experience that you've had in your life can be used for good and to move the needle forward on whatever project you want to undertake. So that's been cool, just as a way to also know when things are really hard, that it's for a purpose and it's for good, and that it's going to help me later on. Like even within racing, like the terrible things I went through in my first 100-miler and all those horrible, hard experiences, every single race course has felt so easy since. And I know I can handle 70 miles of blisters. So if I'm dealing with 20 miles of blisters, like that's totally fine. So it's even the little things that they add up and that help create a stronger and more wise and durable individual in whatever their path is.
Has your answer for what it means to be a good person changed at all?
I don't think that it has. But I have loved getting to hear all of the unique yet consistent answers that people have had. It's as simple as just like pursuing being a better person to as complex as serving others and developing yourself and growing wiser in both your actions and your knowledge and all of the things. But I think the collection of all of the people that you've had on have served to be great models of being a good person in their own spaces. And so taking the little wisdom bombs that each of them have and putting it all together, there you go. There's a good person. It's a collection.
Good deal. Where can people find more from you and all the stuff that you're going to be taking on in the coming weeks, months, years?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram for my personal account, which is cat.elizabeth_. And then for my coaching, which is nutrition and endurance coaching, you can find me at WELLKEPT_ on Instagram as well. Or you can shoot me a direct email to cat@edwardspt.com if you want to have a direct conversation with me. You can find me any of those places.
Awesome. I'll, as always, put those things in the show notes below if anybody listening is interested in checking them out.
Thank you so much, Joel. It's been great catching up with you.
You as well. We'll leave it there. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. If you guys are watching on YouTube, before you head out, please like, comment, and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.